You know, one of the greatest things about working as a professional broadcaster is the opportunity to perform in multi-million-dollar studios where everything looks great. I mean, the audio, the video, the lighting, it is all perfectly calibrated to enhance everything that you do. But that also creates a challenge for a guy like me who wanted his own home studio to create YouTube and other social media content, and I also wanted it to look as close to professional as I could get without spending even close to a fraction of that multi-million-dollar budget. So in this video, I'm going to show you what I've done here, how I've built a home studio that serves great purposes for YouTube, podcasting, and other audiovisual content. First off, let's take a look at the room itself. It's not very big. It's just like everything else in production. Always looks bigger on camera than it is in real life. But I've completely controlled this room in terms of lighting and sound. There are no exposed windows. Daylight does not make its way in here. There are a couple windows in this room, but I've completely blacked them out. Yes, those are shipping blankets that you're seeing there. They serve two purposes, not just to block out all the light, but they also acoustically dampen the sound. There's not a lot of echo in this room. If I clap my hands, if I snap my fingers, you don't hear a ton of echo. You don't hear a lot of reverberation. That is the optimal studio environment. Part of deadening the sound in this room also included putting a rug over the hardwood floor. Essentially, you don't want any hard surfaces because they reflect things like voice. It bounces off from wall to wall, and then you'll hear that echo come back through the microphone. Just doesn't sound professional. That right there is something immediately that'll set you apart if you do that in your home studio. In terms of lighting in here, it's really nothing special, but 5 different lights help me do the trick, including a key light right here, pretty much hitting me square in the face. There's also a fill light up here to kind of brighten up the left side, fill in a dark spot there. As for behind me, you can see the splash lighting that's kind of uplighting the 2 wall surfaces, the reclaimed wood on this side as well as the backdrop on this side. That light also has 2 different gels on it, one blue, one orange, to kind of help enhance the colors that you see behind me. And then last but not least are 2 backlights, which are really hair lights. They literally shoot down on the top of my head to kind of help give some separation between my head and the backdrop. And I also have different color gels on those backlights as well too, to just kind of give it a little bit of a different look in here. So again, a lot of this, before you even get to the equipment, has to do with the treatment of the room. Make sure it's good from the start, not too echoey. Make sure you cut out all the outside light. You want to have complete control of the elements in your studio room. All right, let's talk now about audio specifically and begin with the microphones. I employ 2 of them here in the home studio. One of them you're seeing on camera right now. This is the Neumann TLM 103. It's a large diaphragm condenser mic. You're also seeing it held on a shock mount here, as well as attached to a Rode boom arm. That allows me to adjust as I see fit. Obviously, I wouldn't do that a lot in real time. It does make a little bit of noise, but again, you saw me handle that thing and couldn't hear a whole lot of noise on the microphone itself. So all of this doing a good job to reduce vibration noise, things like me maybe even tapping the desk. I also have the Shure SM7B. As I just told you about the Neumann microphone, it's a condenser. It picks up pretty much everything, has great dynamic range, all the highs and lows. But that's the difference here with a dynamic mic like the Shure SM7B. It doesn't pick up a lot of the noise outside of right in front of my face. In fact, sometimes outside there might be somebody mowing a lawn. I'll choose to use this mic because it is far less sensitive. It only picks up precisely what's in front of it. And again, I use 2 different mics because a lot of times, if I'm taping a podcast here in the home studio with 2 different people, myself included, well, we need 2 mics. And I also want things to sound just a little bit different from one person to the other. Both of these mics run through separate processors, which are actually the same unit. It's a channel strip, a DBX 286S. I'll tell you more about these here now. So the DBX has a couple different features, including number 1, the mic preamp that boosts the signal of the microphone to get to an adequate level where we can kind of adjust how things sound. After the preamp, there's a compressor which allows me to get very, very silent and soft, but also yell if I need to. and the volume automatically kind of levels itself out. That's the job of a compressor. So both of these mics with the different DBX units have that feature built in. There's also something called a de-esser with the DBX286S, where the S's and the sibilants, it kind of cuts down on that. You can choose the frequency, and then you can choose how much. It'll actually cut down the S sound, because a lot of times it's piercing to ears. Then there's an enhancer, which is essentially an equalizer, an EQ. You can turn up both the high and low frequencies. There's enhancements for both of those. Me personally, I have both of those set up just a little bit. I kind of like the way that sounds for me on this mic. And again, all these settings may be different for you depending on your voice and what microphone you're using. And then last but not least, there's something called an expander gate. I'm primarily using the gate function of this to cut down on background noise, because even though the fact that this mic is super quiet, right? It doesn't have a lot of self noise. I still want to cut down on as much outside noise and just any tiny reverberations from this room as I can. Now, all that being said, after the signals from each microphone go through each of these DBX286S processors, they finally get to my mixing console. The mixer I use here is a Soundcraft Signature 12 MTK, and actually the MTK part of that might be the most important feature of all of this. That stands for multi-track recording. What it allows me to do is take all 12 different channels. Actually, there's 14 of them here total. They call it the 12, but there's actually 2 bonus ones thrown in. I can record all of these different channels separately. A traditional mixer only allows you to take 2 channels out of the mixer into the computer via USB and record that. So if you don't get the mix right here on the console, and while you're recording things, there may be distractions, you're not hearing it the right way, you don't get a second chance at remixing that before it is recorded directly to the computer. With a multi-track mixer, you can set it up so that, again, every channel recorded here gets recorded individually as well on your computer, and then you can make volume equalization changes after the fact on your digital audio workstation. This mixer has a ton of other capabilities. I'll do a whole separate video on that, but I can create a mix minus. I can bring in guests remotely via internet services like Skype or ISDN or anything else I want to do. It also has a nice effects panel here where I can introduce echo and reverberation, and you can pretty much do anything you like with this Soundcraft Signature 12 MTK. I highly recommend this as a mixing console if you want the ultimate in versatility. All right, so we talked already about the lighting, but what about the video recording device itself? What camera am I using? The answer is Canon's 5D Mark IV with a 50mm prime lens mounted on the front. I just found that focal length works perfectly in this room to help frame up the shot I'm looking for. Now, specifics on this lens, it's actually the Canon 50 1.2L lens, which means that I can open up the aperture super wide in here, and that allows me to accomplish 2 things. It keeps the lights at a lower level. I don't need to make them super bright to get things how I want to look in here. I don't have to look like I'm in a tanning booth, essentially, to get the lighting right. And the other thing about having such a wide open aperture is that I can make the depth of field quite shallow. I can make this distance between the camera and me and this wall look like it's great, when in reality, it may be only 8 or 9 feet from the camera to the wall. The other trick and cool thing about this camera setup is that using a DSLR from Canon like I do, there is an HDMI out port on it, meaning that I take that video signal and I actually run it through this, the Elgato Cam Link. Now what this allows me to do is take the HDMI signal and turn it into something compatible over USB, which then goes into my computer. And I know what you're thinking already. Yes, I can live stream with my DSLR camera instead of a cheapo webcam. I get a much better quality out of the DSLR than really any webcam can produce right now. I highly recommend this Cam Link device. Not terribly expensive, brilliantly small. You can take this and travel with it. Really a great device. When I got a hold of this thing, I was super excited. And what I plug it into is OBS Studio, which allows me to cut in graphics, even different camera angles if I had a different camera setup. OBS Studio is one of the very best pieces of software out there for live streaming. It sends your audio and video and your broadcast directly to YouTube. or directly to Periscope for Twitter purposes. And the best part of all this? It is entirely free. OBS Studio. Well, that does it for my tour of the home studio and the gear I use here to make content on YouTube. You're probably watching this because you're either setting up something yourself or you already have a setup and you just want to compare what do I use to what do you use. You may have identical gear, you may have very similar stuff, or your setup may look completely different from what I'm doing here. But the thing to point out is it took me weeks to set all this stuff up and to calibrate it the right way so that it looks and sounds just how I want it to. I mean, I'm pretty particular about all this stuff and what the final product looks like, but it just goes to show you, you don't need the most expensive stuff. You just need to spend time with it, calibrate it, keep fine-tuning, keep tinkering with it, and eventually you can get the most out of your equipment and your home studio.